5 p.m. All right, let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thank you for taking your time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. I'm your host, Dave Albright, joined by the always ever-present Mr. Dave Nava. We're both solution engineers at Salesforce and Military Trailblazers. Each week, we invite a co-host or co-host to take part of the conversation so that we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is how to succeed by aiming to fail. So if you've ever experienced setbacks or failures in your career journey, which I think probably most of us have, and are looking for inspiration on how to leverage those experiences to grow and transfer in your career, this is a session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session, Monica Sandberg. Monica is a Salesforce architect at EKIA Incorporated and a member of the Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame. She's known in the Trailblazer community as not as blank Monica, which comes from Salesforce formula syntax, which, by the way, not as blank Monica immediately starts to cause me to shudder as soon as I read it. I'm like, oh no, here we go, formulas. Monica loves formulas and automation and is a frequent presenter and speaker on the topic, including multiple times at Dreamforce. Tonight, she'll be speaking about how to transform failure into career growth and opportunities. Great to have you co-hosting Office Hours with us, Monica. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. It's wonderful.
Would you like to take a quick moment to introduce yourself further and share your story?
That's going to be part of my session, so you'll get to know more about me for sure.
Suspense. It's so suspenseful. I love it. So for those joining for the first time, we always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding-related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career-related goals. Next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help answer questions from your perspective, which helps provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I and others on this call share a lot of great information there, including learning, networking, and employment opportunities. If you'd like to ask a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to do so. If you don't feel as comfortable speaking up, you can also post your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to monitor the chat window and also be looking for raised hands. And finally, tonight's session is being recorded. If you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let us know before speaking. We'll make sure it's edited out of the final recording. Before we dive into the questions, we're going to turn it over to Monica for her presentation. And please hold your questions to the end. If there's anything you do post in chat, Dave and I will pick it up and we will get to them there after her presentation. So with that, Monica, over to you.
All right. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Let's see if I can. So real quick, yeah, you did introduce me. And this session, the first time I gave this session was at Trailblazer DX this past March. And it was beyond my expectations, the feedback received from it, because it's a very personal session and something that I had realized I was doing for some time now and had become habit, but I wasn't sure if it would be helpful to other people. So today I'm going to do it a little differently, because if we're in person, I don't need slides, and it's very easy to see people and to react and to really have a great energy in the room. I don't have that luxury, so I'm going to try something different. I'm aiming to fail here, and I am doing it as a slide deck for the very first time, brand new slides. So bear with me here, and I think that the slides will be helpful, but we're going to find out. I may just fail. Okay. I didn't set myself to present yet. Hang on. Entire screen. Okay, can everyone see the first screen?
It's coming up now.
We good?
Got it.
Yes?
Now. Yep.
All right, here we are. Okay, so this was the session I did at Dreamforce, and at the time the title was How to Boost Your Career and Happiness by Aiming to Fail. So this philosophy and this way of approaching fails, I think, has really helped my life and made a huge difference beyond my wildest expectations. And so I do think that building this habit of aiming to fail can make a big difference. When I did this at Trailblazer DX, there were people all in the halls, all the way around, and just people kept coming in and coming in. So I know this is an important topic for all of us, and something, though, that we don't like to talk about too much. But first, I want to start with where I am now so you can understand my journey and how I got there, and how understanding how fails were affecting me and changing and pivoting on how I thought about them did change my life in ways that I could never, ever imagine. So we're going to start with where am I now? And then we're going to go back to where I started, and you're going to see the progression here, and how my this philosophy of aiming to fail, how this came about. I am a Salesforce MVP, and I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And this is insane to me. It's just absolutely crazy. If you had asked me years ago, would you be a Salesforce MVP? I would have said you were out of your mind. I knew no one. I knew nothing. I never, ever imagined. And Hall of Fame, oh, come on. It's just insane to me. The people in the room with me, I'm in awe of every one of them. And it's just like, how did I get here? It's just still. And so one of the things that I also don't believe is this year was an amazing year. I had a lot of sessions that I did. I did a lot of conferences. And I started with the architect group. I did a thing on record sugar flows, architecture patterns. Again, another thing, I never imagined I'd be a speaker and speaking on these topics in such a way, and people would be looking to me for answers. That just, I couldn't fathom this happening. But this is where I am today. And I did a couple of sessions. I'm co-leader of the insurance community group. I did refactoring flow. So now I have a different topic that I was working on this year. And then I did 2 sessions at Midwest Dreaming, and one on design patterns, and one was a quick start guide to flow. And I'm going to confession time right here that the hands-on training session didn't go so well. I miscalculated the expertise of the room, because I was told that they would be of a certain expertise, and it turned out not to be. So that one didn't go so well. So sometimes, sometimes you have a fail. And at Dreamforce, I did several sessions at Dreamforce, and super proud of my session on data quality. And then I worked with Salesforce on the first time meetup. We had hundreds of people that were new to the Salesforce ecosystem. And I'm always working with Misty Jones on Flying Solo and at Como Mai, where we welcome people into the ecosystem. Busy year. And then I did Salesforce Automation Hour on best practices. Still, hard to imagine that I could have input on Salesforce Flow best practices when I was starting out my career. So it all comes down to this word. It's a word that most of us have an emotional response to. Absolutely emotional response. And it's a word, it's a thing that we avoid. And, I don't want to fail. I can't fail. So we avoid doing things that we think are going to be a fail. And when something doesn't happen for us and we do fail, it is an emotional thing for most of us. It hurts. It's deep wounds to some of us. And I want to show you, and we're going back in time to when I was starting with Salesforce, and I was 2 years into my journey, and I took the admin exam. 2 years in. Now, I was an accidental admin, one of those, and I went to Dreamforce and I took the exam at Dreamforce. It ruined my Dreamforce. I cried. I was devastated. I thought, what am I thinking? I don't have a tech background. How am I thinking that I could be, in this ecosystem? Well, I don't belong. I felt less than. And that's a lot of times what these fails do, especially these certifications, when you don't pass a certification. But it's not valid. And here's why. if you're thinking that I was just beginning and I hadn't done anything in Salesforce yet, you would be wrong, because this is how crazy fails can really hurt and take you to another level. I actually didn't circle back and take that exam again for 2 more years. At the time that I took that exam, I was already a Salesforce architect. Now, I didn't know I was a Salesforce architect. I had no idea. People weren't using that term very often. And what had happened was I was in marketing. I was a marketing director, and we had brought Salesforce in. And I saw Salesforce, and I said to my boss knows I had crazy ideas. I was in marketing. Hey, let's not, and this was years ago, and no one was doing this at the time too much. People were using there was Sales Cloud. That was it. I said, let's take the Salesforce platform and build and get rid of all of our legacy systems and run our entire company on Salesforce. Let's replace the agency management system that we have and go all in on Salesforce. And he said, okay. And we brought in 3 big companies that were consultants, and 1, 2, 3, they failed. We had nothing. By the time, thousands of dollars gone, and we had nothing. They wouldn't listen to my ideas, and to be honest, they didn't even ask me the right questions. And so I went to my boss and said, hey, I know I don't know anything, but I can't do any worse. Why don't I build our system? And I did. By the time I took that admin certification, we were running on the Salesforce platform that I alone had built, without any training, without knowing. I was in marketing. I didn't know insurance. I built an insurance platform. I didn't know accounting, and yet we were doing all of our banking based on Salesforce records and formulas that I had created. And I had to redo all of the procedures in our organization and retrain the staff and come up and reimagine everything we did. Every single thing we did was reimagined. I had delivered. I had done it. We were successful. I aimed to fail and didn't even know it at the time. We could have gone out of business. My boss could have lost his business. I could have lost my job. It could have been catastrophe. It wasn't. And I failed that admin exam, and I was devastated. This is how crazy, you have so many talents and you know so much, and yet one thing that little thing that you don't succeed at can really wound you. And I'm here to tell you that it should not. Change your mindset about fails. And so at this point in my journey, I still wasn't that self-aware yet of that. I was still wounded by not passing my admin exam. But I want you to know that you absolutely, everyone on this call knows more than you think you do, because I am living proof of it. And you can do more than you think you can. Absolutely. I am living proof of that. So we're back to this word fail. And I had something that happened after this admin exam that was life-changing. And this is where this whole philosophy of aiming to fail, where I really started to realize the payoff. And it was Dreamforce 2016. I had an idea to do a session. Now, I was not a Salesforce MVP. I was not a user group leader. I had never spoken publicly ever in my life. I did not know the subject matter that well, if at all. I wanted to do a session on Process Builder. At the time, there was very little documentation on it. There weren't any videos, really. There wasn't any training. And I thought that I could do a session at Dreamforce. This is insane. I know. Again, aiming to fail. I didn't realize it till afterwards. This was life-changing. So I was so scared by this thought, but something got into me that I was going to do this, that I asked Misty Jones, who was flying solo, and I knew her from Dreamforce, one of the few people that I knew, because I'd never talked to anyone. I was too shy. I said, if I have an idea for a session, will you do it with me if we get accepted? And she felt sorry for me. I found out later she only said yes because she knew there was no chance no chance that I would get a session accepted for Dreamforce. But guess what? I did. Life-changing, aiming to fail, pushing beyond my comfort level, risking absolutely making a fool of myself and failure. And we did this session at Dreamforce. Misty did it with me. She was also terrified. We were both at the recording. They used to record all the sessions, and my voice, you could hear me shaking, and it went up and down and up and down, and I was all over the place. But the session was a success. We had a lot of applause, and we even were invited back to do the same session the next year. And here's one of the slides, totally crazy. And it was an off-the-wall session. We were bantering back and forth. There were funny moments. There were jokes. And that was my session, not the typical, really strict on, this is what my session's about. And this is the topic. Not that kind of session at all. And how did I get there? So when I was there at Dreamforce that year, I had to talk to some people because I was afraid no one would come to my session. And so I talked to a few people and I said, would you come to my session? I made a little flyer. And I met a couple of people who were Salesforce famous, who were MVPs, and they were super nice to me. But they did ask me how I got a session, not in a bad way. They didn't get a session in that year. And they said, well, what's your secret? How did you do it? And it was aiming to fail. But there's another part of this. This is my session abstract. And what you do when you submit to speak at an event is that you first you come up with a title, and then you write usually a couple of sentences in paragraph form what the session is about. I told these people that I spent, and it's the truth, 8 hours writing what you see here. Took me 8 hours. And every one of them was, you deserve to have a session at Dreamforce. And what I didn't realize, and I look back, and this whole fail thing has kind of taken over my life now, but what I was doing was I rewrote that title probably 50 times. I rewrote those sentences over and over and over again and again and again and again. What I was doing was failing. I was failing privately. So sometimes your fails are public and sometimes they're private. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. And what I did was I turned fail upside down. And I reimagined. I didn't realize this till a little bit later when I started doing more and more and more of this. You kind of get addicted to it. You kind of feel like, yeah, I can do it. There's nothing to lose. I'm gonna fail. And it's okay to fail. And what fail really is, here's my definition. First attempt in learning. If you really think about it, every time you try something and you don't succeed, you are going to learn something. And I'm going to take that even the next step, because here's the reality. A lot of times it's not the first attempt in learning. A fail has to do with attempt in learning, attempt in learning, attempt in learning, attempt in learning. So every time I was rewriting that little session abstract, it was an attempt in learning. But I was moving forward. I was moving forward. I was propelling forward. Each time I rewrote it, forward, forward, forward. Had that session not got in, it still would not have been that bad, because I would have learned so much. And maybe the next conference or something else, I would have gotten a session accepted. And so I have this sign in my house, and it says, nothing changes if nothing changes. Think about that. Nothing changes if nothing changes. If we don't like where we are at this moment, something has to change, or nothing will change. So fails happen all the time. When you're learning to ski, you're going to fall and then you get up again. I never learned to ski, by the way, because I was afraid of falling. This is one of the things that avoiding fails can do for you. I never did this. I had so many people invite me. I had so many opportunities, and I didn't ski because I was afraid to fail. I was afraid to fall. But in order to ski, you have to be willing to fail, to fall. So now, this many years later, I aim to fail on a daily basis. It's habit. The more you do it, the more you think about it, the more you celebrate. You need to celebrate your fails. You need to think of them as attempts in learning. And sometimes you don't succeed. Something that you really want. I don't always get a session submitted at a conference that I want to speak at. I don't always pass a certification exam. I can tell you many times I don't pass certification exams. And I think of it as, okay, now I know what I did and I can do it a different way the next time. It is an attempt in learning. And I do these aiming to fail on a daily basis, every single day now. And I've been doing this for years, that I try to learn something new, whether I have a developer work, I see something on a blog, I see something on LinkedIn, I see something somewhere, and I say, oh, let me see how that works. Or there's a new feature that comes out, or I have an idea of something to make an org better. And I say, you know what? I know I did it that way 3 years ago, but there might be a way to refactor, or best practices. There might be something that I can do, the automation number that I do when I do flows. It's very unique. I think I'm still the only one that does that. I do try and tell people that it's a good system, and some people have taken on that system. But that came from aiming to fail, from attempts in learning, and this philosophy that I try to do this every single day. And it is a mindset shift, and it is emotionally, you're still gonna, you still get a little upset. I'm not gonna lie, I still get, oh, I'm kind of bummed that I didn't pass that exam. But then I'm over it. Right away, I shift again and understand what a fail really is. That definition of a fail is important. That definition really does make a difference. So now what I'd like us to do here is something that we did in San Francisco, is share and celebrate our fails together. So any fail that you're willing to share, I'm going to share one right now. I had a fail today, so I'm going to share it in just a moment. But anything that you're willing to share, which could be a certification exam, a job, maybe you deleted 20,000 records accidentally at work one time, anything can be, and we should all applaud and celebrate fails together as a group, one by one. And I'm going to share something that I just did. I saw something on LinkedIn, and it was how to do something in PowerPoint. So I wanted to do it, and oh, there it is, but it should be animated. And I'm having a heck of a time doing this. It took me multiple trials. Let me see. See, when I animate it, I still don't have it right. I still a fail, because the way they showed it on LinkedIn was that text you saw a moment ago that said shift your mindset is supposed to stay there while the animation runs. I can't get it to work. So today I had a fail, but I learned a lot. I learned how to do all of this in PowerPoint, and I didn't know how to do this swervy line thing, and how to have part of the word translucent like that. So yeah, I failed today, and I try to do that every day. So let's get back, and I'm going to stop sharing, and let's see what we can do.
I can start us out. So my fail was and still is with Omni Studio. I took a Trailhead Academy course for a week on Omni Studio to dive in, and it just didn't click. So finished the course and was unable to create a flex card, an Omni script, really anything. And to this day, like it's still on my list of things to do, but yeah, I'm a flow guy.
That's awesome, David. Celebrate. It's the mindset shift. We all should be celebrating every time we fail, because we learn something, or we learn that that's not for us sometimes.
Yep.
Sometimes you learn that whatever it is that you thought was so important to you, that it isn't for you. Okay.
I've told this a couple times on here, but I'll go next. And Nava was actually instrumental on this. Was I I passed admin, just lucky, right? Had no background in it, no background in computers. I was a bit of a nerd, but took admin, failed sales consultant next, and then passed it the second time. I was like, okay, no big deal. And then took process process application. What's the one I'm thinking of, Dave? Yep, app builder. So I took app builder, and I had already built. I was working as a 1099, and I built stuff kind of like you, Monica. I was like, oh, I got this. Went in there, failed it. Took it the second time. I was like, piece of cake. For some reason, I did this on my wife's birthday at like 8 a.m. I was like, oh, I'll just take this test real quick. We'll pass it, and then we'll go out. And studied up real quick on relationships right before I walked in there, master details and lookups. Got it backwards. I think I got every one of them exactly backwards.
All right.
And failed it a second time. And that was literally like, a moment where I was like, that's it. I'm kind of done. Like, I'm not built for this tech career. I don't know what I'm doing here.
There you go.
And you just have to pick yourself up. And now when you get more certs, the sting and the fail hurts less, right? And it has less effect on you. But when you're early in that career, especially that first admin cert, man, it's a real gut check, and you got to drive through it. And that's a tough fail to kind of pick yourself up from. So.
But it's not even really legitimate in the sense that's a multiple choice test on all these little facts, and that has no bearing on whether or not you can do Salesforce or Salesforce or any. I mean, let's be honest, that sometimes we put more into these things and give them more power over us than they should have.
You're absolutely right, right? Like, they're a little unrealistic in what they want you to do, right? Every day when you do config, you literally just kind of go, okay, it should be over here. Where do I do? Let me Google that real quick. In the test, you can't do that. You have to know exactly which button to click, and it becomes a little unrealistic, but that's how you kind of get certed. And so you just deal with it. But yes, fun times.
All right. Who else is sharing?
Everyone's like, I don't know. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. I've worked with a lot of like CRMs and been admins with them, but right now that's where I am. I failed my first attempt after the associate cert for admin, and licking up my wounds and studying and trying to get studying for the test. And so I think it's that thing of knowing it's, I have done security, user security and all of those things with other CRMs and platforms. It's just learning this one and learning to the test and going through that, and wish I was a better test taker. And so if anything, it's really reassuring to know that, people have been doing this for a very long time also are not great test takers at times, and that it's just one of those hurdles that I've got to jump over. And so
every time you do it, it's a step forward. It really is a step forward because you get better at even the test taking. So it's a step forward, not a step back. That's one of the things about failing. Is if you imagine it in your mind as, okay, that's great. I'm really happy that happened. Now I'm closer. I'm moving forward.
Yep.
And the other thing is those failures, like you said, Monica, I don't get the relationships wrong anymore when it comes to master details and lookups, right? When you fail at that pain, that sting, you will go back and you will fix that and you will remember it. And so sometimes those fails actually kind of work in your favor, even though, and like you said, Amy, you bring the weight to it. It was Dave Nava, and that's why I brought him up for those that were on earlier or have heard this story before. I didn't really know Dave at the time, but I saw him on LinkedIn. And I was like, I just failed it, twice. And he's like, dude, no one knows how many times you failed unless you tell them. They only know that you passed. And that's like an important part of this, right? You got to take that wound yourself, but no one knows. No one really cares, right? So always something to think about.
That brings up another point that I didn't mention that I usually mention, is that you see people in the front of the room giving sessions, you see MVPs, you see people that have written books or Salesforce famous, and you think they have all the answers. And I am the first one. Usually almost every session I do, especially technical sessions, I start with, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. I have lots and lots of questions. I don't have all the answers. And so you just think that everyone else knows more than you, or, hey, I can tell you that the people that wrote these books and I talked to them is they said, they didn't even know they wrote it because they thought, well, it might be helpful, but they don't know that that's the right way to do it. They just do it that way and thought that's a way to do it and it should be legitimate. And a lot of these things over years have become the standards, but it's not. It's sometimes you think that everyone else is ahead of you. We're all in the same boat, no matter how many certifications or what your job title is. You know, the CTAs, they don't know everything. It's changing every minute. And we're all learning all the time, and we're all failing all the time. We're all in it together. So you always, I know that I used to think, oh, you know, that these people doing these sessions, you know, we're the experts. I don't even like that word anymore because none of us are experts.
Absolutely. I mean, and Dave and I get it a lot just from our job and being the solution engineer, right? Like we have to come into and look at a use case and figure out the best answer for it. And it's like, I don't know, like, let's figure some stuff out. Christopher, you have a hand raised.
Yeah, just two quick examples. Are you having trouble hearing me?
Yeah, you're just a little bit quiet.
Let me change my microphone here.
Oh, you're better now.
Oh, okay. You can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. An example of a fail with the certifications, Experience Cloud. I thought, oh, I've made a couple of really basic Experience Cloud sites. Let me take this exam. I didn't just fail it. I bombed it. Like 30% bombed. And that one took me a couple of months to come back to and go, oh, I really should study the trail and the focus on forest stuff for it. And that's one of the larger ones. It's like Sales Cloud. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things to memorize and slides and all that. So, but another failure that it was more an example of continuous failure and failing forward. At the consultancy where I was at, I got put on a couple of projects as a data architect. I'd done a little bit of data migration, hadn't done any data architecting, but they had a data architect to back me up, good team, but I was struggling. And it's one of those times where I had a really good project manager and a really good technical architect in charge, and reached out to me, helped me find the sources that I needed, and really saw the strength of that team. Everybody's in it together, of Agile that we used there to get these projects done. And we delivered the project, we got everything we needed, but in the middle of that, I was, like a couple of times folks here, I was ready to walk away from Salesforce and from consulting altogether because it was that level of stress. And being able to reach out to people, being able to lean on people, and even if they don't know the answer, help you find those insights is part of that learning process. And it really taught me a lot failing forward in that project. That's what I had.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Experience Cloud is one of those ones that's just a shocker. You're like, man, I've built a couple of these, but you forget about all the other stuff it tests you on, like CMS that you never work with, other stuff. And you're like, okay. I see Phipps has a hand raised, and then Raj. So Phipps, you're up.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So I really appreciate this topic because whenever I talk to people who are new getting into Salesforce or they're thinking about it, I tell them all the time, I've failed a Salesforce exam 4 separate times. Luckily for me, I've taken 11. So when people see that, yeah, so when people see that I have, 7 certifications, they don't see the 4 that I failed, including admin twice, which made me question, am I really going to do this, right? So, um, failure is a big part of it, and it's a great part of it. You gotta embrace it. And so I absolutely believe that. Also, another failure I did was one time when I was the senior business analyst at a manufacturing company. I decided to download the highlighter managed package, right? So I implemented it, not a big deal. Then I get a call from the director of customer service. He said, I don't know why, but all 300 customer service agents are locked out of the case page layout. And I couldn't figure out why. Basically, what happened was I implemented it in production. Number one, don't do anything in production before testing it. But also, I implemented not realizing that I didn't have all the permission set licenses necessary to cover every last one of the customer service reps. So I implemented it. It looked great, but only I could see it because we only had one license. So I said, okay, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. So yeah, so that was, look, I was able to change it back in 5 minutes, so no big deal. Nobody lost their job, but yeah, that was pretty rough.
Yeah,
That's
thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, I'm laughing with you because let me tell you, I've done some stuff in production, both not knowing and knowing, like knowing, hey, we got to make this risk, and yeah, that risk never goes well. But um, thanks for sharing that one. Raj, you're up.
Hi guys, I think you mean myself. I'm
Yep.
Rajendran Parthiban from New Zealand. I can't thank you guys enough that I stumbled upon this meeting in LinkedIn when I was browsing LinkedIn. Thank you so much. Um, I failed an interview. I got a job offer rejected yesterday after 3 weeks of process going through 2 interview sets, and the last one was the technical interview. And the most, uh, sad thing is that they approved my interview on the day last Friday, and I was told by the recruitment agent that I did really well. They like me, and it's most likely they're going to go through with me. It's a company based in Australia and New Zealand. And then yesterday in the evening, I got a call. I'm really sorry. The position you were considered for is no longer going through. They have taken that position away and they have recruited somewhere else. Uh, so that's a failure. Yes. I was really looking forward to that because I was made redundant as a Salesforce administrator because of global crisis of sales. In my last company in last March. Ever since, I'm looking to get back into Salesforce ecosystem. I love Salesforce. I have a PhD in chemistry, and I stumbled upon to become a Salesforce administrator on the job training and passed the Salesforce administrator exam in the first go. With my experience, I didn't study too much, but I managed to pass it, but marginally with some numbers like 40%, 50%, some of them 80% service console, sales cloud. I managed to pass it somehow, but on the job training, everything happened. I have 3 years experience as an administrator, but still I couldn't get into the system. But I'm not leaving it there. I'm studying for the app builder certification now, and I'm also uh, studying Apex, and I'm also learning Flow. in-depth flow, and I have unlocked the super batch. I'm doing the flow administration in the super batch as well. So I'm keeping my learning. Hope someone will hire me, but yeah, failure is part of the learning process, as Monica said. It is very true. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I can hear the heartbreak in your voice, and I feel for you because it just hurts, right? And tech is in a slight little slump right now. I know sometimes Dave and I come on here, at Salesforce, and we hear about a lot of the people struggling to find jobs and things, and it can be difficult, right? Like we're kind of here at Salesforce in the ecosystem and kind of seeing some of the stuff and hearing it. And it kind of can be a little difficult. So I feel for you, and I'm sorry that didn't work out. But you've got the right attitude. You're just going to keep getting some certs and some learning, and keep applying, right? And find the job that's out there. I think most of the jobs that I know I found were because networking and kind of beating down the door and finding things, because I was never qualified for this job. The one thing I will say, when I was actually applying at Salesforce, I was pretty nervous that I wasn't going to get in. And somebody who actually frequents the show actually sent me a text message, said, the master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried. And I kept that on my to-do list. I literally see it almost every day. I probably look right past it. But it's such a powerful statement, right? And it's so true, right? When you think like, oh, like you were saying, Monica, these people that stand up, the CTAs, the folks who are in Dreamforce, and they'll stand there and talk, and you're like, they know everything. And then you go talk to them, and the best ones will tell you. I work with one of our CTAs pretty frequently, and he's like, man, I don't even know how I got through that cert. Like, like I have no reason to be here. And you're like, huh, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting to hear that. So I've just always thought that was such a powerful statement, right? And then when I would kind of do a lot of the certs early on, I would kind of look at that and be like, okay, it's no big deal if we fail. We're just going to pick it up and keep going. So with that thought, and then we'll get back to Monica, or if more people want to share. We're a little past the midpoint of the show, actually. So midpoint of our session. Before I forget, let's get a group photo for sharing on social. Is important because we'll always need to be branding, Raj, just like we were talking about with you. Get that information out there, get that face and experience out there. We'll plan to post this on LinkedIn and Twitter tomorrow, and we'll tag everyone in the photo. If you only have your first name showing in Google Meet and want to be tagged, please feel free to include your full name in the chat window. It makes it much easier to tag you. And for everyone who wants to participate in the photo, please unmute your video and I'll grab a screenshot. Most likely, I'll probably have my mouth open tomorrow when you see it, because 90% of the time I take the worst picture. So hold on your comments right here. I'll give you a countdown, and then we'll get a quick picture. So 3, 2, 1. I cringe right now because I know it's going to be just a hard. Oh yeah, actually, it's not too bad of me for once. Oh. Lightning must be about to strike, or my computer's going to lock up and freeze. One or the other. All right. Anyone else like to share a comment or thought?
Cool.
What's
Yeah,
that,
I just wanted to, just with Raj, like I've been pretty close to there. I had like 2 or 3 interviews for a marketing slot that I thought was a lock, and I went in for the group interview where you meet the team, and that's when I really, like, it was an internal hire, so I was like super confident that I'd already impressed the manager. I'd had like 2 or 3 interviews already, so this was just a quick meet and greet with the team before you get in. And yeah, it was like I don't know what happened in the interview with the team, but I think I probably came in a little bit too confident. They heard about my National Guard obligations, and I think that got a little bit, they just weren't into it. So that happens, especially like it's tough, especially when you think that you're going to get it. But I completely agree with Monica where it's, the obstacle is the way, right? Like if you can take that failure and you're continuing to follow these lines of failures, you're going to get where you need to go. So yeah, and I probably never would have even found Salesforce if it wasn't for that rejection. So I think it's going to work out long term.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that one. Anyone else like to share? Otherwise, I'm gonna ask Monica the hard question.
Uh-oh. Please share.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an interesting point, right? As we as individuals get more comfortable with failing, and Monica, your kind of brand is aim to fail, right?
Right.
Not everyone around us picks up on that. For instance, if I walked into my bosses tomorrow, I'm like, I'm going to blow my next demo, guys. I'm
Right.
pretty sure my manager might be like, a moment, sir. So how has the culture at your company supported your growth mindset of embracing failure on as a path to learning?
Oh, my boss, I just have one of those crazy bosses and incredible bosses that, first of all, that he trusted me back at the beginning and took a risk. He put his company on the line for this. No one at this time was doing what we were doing. Nobody was running their whole company on Salesforce. Everybody was connecting. They were using Salesforce for sales. There was no insurance cloud. There was no financial services cloud. I don't even think Service Cloud was, maybe Service Cloud was just coming out. This was insane, crazy at the time for such a small company. We were a very small company. But my boss is a risk taker. And so he was very positive all along and has always been very positive. So, not everything works out perfectly in Salesforce. And over time, there were a lot of features missing. I had to do all kinds of hinky workarounds and crazy things. And now I have to, I've been refactoring over years. But so sometimes, there'll be a little hiccup or something. And he's just like, yeah, mistakes happen because I'm not the only one. I mean, everyone in the company makes mistakes. If you look at, people have bad data in their org. How did the bad data happen? People made mistakes. People miss sales opportunities. People, miss renewal deadlines. All kinds of stuff happens that I've seen over the years. In all my years of working, I've never worked with anyone that was perfect. Ever. I've had bosses that made big mistakes that took us down the wrong path or that weren't proactive on something that you could foresee. So, I understand your point of view is that there's very little room for error. So then your fails need to be private. In other words, in Salesforce world, I start in a developer org and I have an idea for something crazy. And I do get crazy ideas for new ways of doing things. I build in a developer org before I even think about going to Sandbox. It's in a developer org with something that has nothing to do with my business, in an org that I could break things. And some of the best stuff that I've done in my sessions is something that I broke and was able to show someone, I tried this, it didn't work, but now, you don't want to do that in production because if you do this, this, and this will happen. And, if you don't check for dupes here, then you're going to have a problem with your record trigger flow. And so a lot of the things that I teach on are mistakes. One time I was doing a session at Dreamforce and I was trying to test Process Builder and how Process Builder could handle batch processing. And I did something and I got a unbelievable long. I mean, it was one of those error messages that just went on and on and on and on and on. And there was some limit that I didn't know about that was not even documented hardly at all. There was one little thing that they had answered a question, known issues, and it was some obscure limit. And I was able to use that in my session because I had broken it and found this limit that you had to actually do computations to figure out whether you were going to hit the limit. You had to add some numbers together and things. And so, break things, do it. But you do have to, that's a very good point. In your job, in your day job, this aiming to fail, I'm careful about it. Let's just, yeah.
And good DevOps, right? You're breaking it in a sandbox or a dev org long before you pushed it into production. It's when stuff's
Usually.
in production and when you're making last minute changes,
We've all
hot
done
changes,
it.
hot fixes.
Confession time. Let's be we've all done it.
What's that line?
Especially if you're in a small org.
I don't test often, but when I do it in production. Mr. Nava, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a quick piggyback. I know we've only got 10 minutes left based upon Monica's comment where, how do you determine whether or not your company is forgiving of failure? And I think in her case, it came down to the manager, right? The person. And in some cases, it comes down to the culture and what that company is founded on. And Salesforce innovation being one of our core values. I think as long as you are trying something new with good intentions and you put the proper planning into place, I think both companies and individuals are going to be more forgiving if it doesn't turn out. So like, for example, I was trying to think of a way as a solution engineer to create more excitement around our solutions. And so I was going to start a customer-focused webinar where I would invite customers into a webinar focused around a certain use case, like hire retire or supply relationship management. I'd invite a partner. And so the partner would do a demo, I'd do a demo, the account exec would talk about, business challenges, and then we kind of turn it over to the customers for Q&A and see what they thought. And we did, I had created this from scratch and brought lots of people in and marketing was involved, and we had 2 of these. And ultimately, like when we got to the customer part, there was crickets and they didn't want to interact at all. And when we asked them questions, discovery questions to kind of get the conversation going, nothing. So not for lack of trying, but it ended up being a failure and something that I ultimately scrapped as we kind of moved to other ways to get customer interest. But because, it's one of our core values, there was no reprimand. There was no, I'm disappointed in you. It was a, good try, and we'll see what works next.
Phipps, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, so based on your experience, could you have actually done something that could have helped, or what was it doomed from the start?
It's hard to say. I think customers in general are not open to talking about their challenges and their concerns in front of other customers that are also on the same call. Maybe their information is proprietary, maybe they just don't want to out themselves. And so that could have been something that I identified early on. Not sure really how to fix that. So now we tend to do things more one-on-one, one-on-one workshops, as opposed to group things involving multiple customers. And I found more success with that. But it's a problem that I would like to reattack in the future and kind of figure out how we could approach it. It's just my approach at that time wasn't ultimately successful.
We have the same issue in the insurance. I co-lead the insurance group, and very little participation for probably those very reasons that you just mentioned, proprietary and
And the same thing, right? You don't want to look like a failure in front of everyone. You don't want to look like you don't know. I mean, the number of times I'm like, Dave, how do we do that again? On Slack back and forth, right? And because everyone expects us to know everything. So, you got to be, this is all the same stuff. Okay, let's see. We've already talked about sysadmin here, and Amy kind of brought it up. So the gateway to the tech job and the ecosystem is the system admin cert. What do you say to someone who has failed the exam 2 or more times and is considering giving up? What are your words of wisdom on that?
Fail it 8 times, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I don't know what the limit is on it, but when I was at years ago, Salesforce, they've renamed it Boot Camp, but it used to be called Salesforce success. I forgot the name of it, but it's basically the boot camp where you take classes and then you take certifications. And we did it in Las Vegas, I think, a couple of times that I went to this. And I remember the first time I failed one of the exams, and I talked to someone that worked from Salesforce that was there, because a lot of the Salesforce employees used to also attend. And he said, "Oh yeah, don't you worry about it. We all take the certifications at Salesforce, and most of us don't pass till at least the third time. And it's nothing." And he was right. And there's someone else, Michael Drzwicki, who I've gone to boot camp with. We did a session at Dreamforce together, and his philosophy, and he has a great philosophy on certifications, is that your first couple of times you take it, they're practice exams. He sees the actual live exam as a practice exam. And he said the first time, second time, third time, those are practice exams. That's you just getting a feel for the exam, getting to know it, getting to understand how they ask the questions and all of that. And he has 20, I don't even know how many certifications. And I know, because I've watched him do it, is that he actually would, and he takes them not in person most of the time, he takes them by camera, is that after we had dinner all together in Vegas, he went and took an exam, and I talked to him the next morning. He goes, "Yeah, I failed it." And then he goes, "I'm going again today." And he goes again. And then if he fails it, he goes again. And he has had great success with this. So he doesn't see it, that failure, in the same way. He just says, "Oh, it's a practice exam." And I love that.
I've always thought early on, when I was like, just a couple certs in or something, I found David Liu's stuff when I was getting into Apex, sfdc99.com. I think that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's SFDC for the 99. He has a great page on there about how to take them and how to view them, right? And like, if you take it, look at what you failed, strengthen it up, and go right back in there, right? Get right back in there in the 24-hour window while it's still fresh.
Sooner than later, him and Michael, they were both at boot camp together, and they were coming up with that whole thing. And I have, he's failed exams. And we all, like, that's what I say, you see people with the 25 exams and you say, "Oh, they're such a success," but their failures are private. Some of them.
Yep.
Now, some of them are very public about it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be public about it, right? Like, people are like, "Oh, you're an architect, or you have this many certs." It doesn't, Dave and I both kind of grew up in the world of aviation, where you measure success by how many hours you have, and you could have 6,000 hours, or you can have 1 hour 6,000 times, right? And it's kind of the same concept, right? All those certs don't really mean a lot. This means you've taken the test, just like Dave had written earlier, that you can pass tests. So, yeah.
I have respect for people that keep trying. There is something to be said for that. That's, I spent 8 hours on one abstract of one little paragraph to send to speak at an event. That is a good quality. You have to give yourself some grace, and you have to understand that is moving forward, that you're still working. When you give up, that's when it's done. That's when you failed, to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And continuing to fail the exact same way, you have to kind of figure out why and switch it up, learn what you're not getting on. But it looks like we have 1 minute left. You ready for your closing question, Monica?
Okay.
If you could provide one overarching takeaway, what is the most important aspect of embracing failure as a natural part of the learning process?
Is to shift the emotion about it, celebrate it instead of letting
that's a really good point.
The emotion is everything, and the more you do it, the more you aim to fail. Like I had the little thing today, the PowerPoint, it's not working perfectly. It doesn't hurt as much. if you're only doing one test in 6 months, that hurts a lot. But if you're taking tests all the time, it's like, tomorrow there's another test.
That
emotion.
is a really great point, right? Because we assign the emotion, we assign the weight to it, as we've said in here a couple times. And if you give it that power, you're the one that kind of ends up taking the brunt of it, right? So that's a great point. Thank you. So before we close, I'd like to thank Monica for co-hosting tonight's session. A lot of great input and feedback, especially from the audience in there. It's been awesome having you here and getting your perspective on the topics we've discussed. So I'd like to thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And with that, thank you so much for attending. Hope to see you all next week, actually in 2 weeks. And have a great Wednesday night.